Jocks, after all these hours, do you really have more girls in the gym? Because my experience was not at all what I imagined it would be. Answer 1. When I first started working out in the gym, one of my motivations, to be honest, was precisely to attract the attention of girls. I thought that if I became pumped up, everything in my personal life would change dramatically. I imagined how the girls themselves would show interest, and how this would make it easier to meet and communicate with them. At first, when the first results began to appear, muscle relief, more confident posture, I really noticed that some girls began to pay attention to me. In the gym, this was expressed in smiles. Sometimes someone would come up and start a conversation about fitness. It was nice, I won't lie. However, after some time, I realized that the amount of attention from girls had increased, but the quality of this attention left much to be desired. The fact is that many saw me only in appearance and physical form, and often our communication did not go beyond the superficial level. In real life, outside the gym, I noticed that appearance can help at the first stage, but then it all depends on the personality and how you behave. I also realized that physical fitness is not a panacea. Yes, your self-confidence has increased, but if you don't know how to carry on a conversation, if you don't have interests or you're not interesting as a person, then even the most impressive appearance won't save you. Surprisingly, my popularity among girls hasn't really increased as much as I originally expected. Perhaps he simply began to attract a different type of girl, those who pay attention to appearance, but nothing more. And one more thing. After I became more muscular, some girls even began to avoid communication because I began to seem to them too serious or a nerd. This is also an interesting twist that I hadn't thought of. As a result, I came to the conclusion that it is important to be in shape for yourself and not in order to attract the attention of others. Girls who are truly interesting pay attention to your personality, how you carry yourself, and not just your body. Answer 2. Let me start by saying that yes, I have always been quite thin, and I wanted to change my body to feel more confident. When I started working out seriously at the gym, my goal was not only to become stronger, but also to attract more attention from girls. After all, many say that a pumped-up body is the key to success. I began to notice the first changes after a few months. The shoulders became wider, the pectoral muscles became more defined, even the t-shirts began to fit differently. And indeed, the girls' attention increased. In the gym, many people began to pay attention. Someone paid compliments and asked how I achieved such results. It was nice and added motivation to continue. However, outside the hall, everything was different. Expectations that a pumped-up body would lead to a sharp increase in the number of girls did not materialize. Yes, appearance helps to attract attention, but this is not enough to build a relationship. I began to notice that girls could come up and talk, but it didn't go further than that. It turns out that just having muscles doesn't automatically make you attractive in the long run. Moreover, in some cases, a pumped-up body even created barriers. Some girls perceived me as only about sports or thought I was too into myself, which wasn't always true. Another surprise, some even suggested that I might be aggressive or uninteresting to talk to. As a result, I realized that a pumped-up body is only part of the overall picture. Of course, I don't regret starting training. This improved my health, gave me confidence, but did not radically change my relationships with girls. I realized that it is much more important to develop communication skills, to be an interesting and versatile person. Being physically fit helps you get started, but it takes a lot more than just muscles to maintain interest and build something real. Answer 3. When I first decided to take care of my body and start going to the gym, I had a whole bunch of reasons for it. First of all, I wanted to look better, become stronger, but I won't lie. Part of me hoped that this would also bring success with girls. I have always believed that physical fitness plays a huge role in how others perceive you, and it would seem that what could be more attractive than a pumped-up body? The first thing I noticed when I started progressing in the gym was a change in the way I perceived myself. I gained more confidence, my mood improved, and I felt more comfortable in my skin. It certainly had an impact on how I interacted with others, including girls. I was no longer ashamed of my body, and it showed. I became more open, began to start conversations more often with girls whom I would not have even tried to talk to before. In the gym, of course, there was more attention, Some girls began to take an interest in my progress, asking for advice on training or simply praising my results. But when it comes to real life outside the gym, things turned out to be a little more complicated. Yes, I gained more confidence and perhaps this made me more attractive, but there were no dramatic changes in my personal life. It turned out that girls really pay attention to appearance, but this is far from the only factor. Over time, I realized that a toned body can attract attention, but maintaining that attention is much more difficult. This can be a bonus in the early stages of dating, but it's not enough to build a relationship. Moreover, sometimes my muscles even became an obstacle. There were times when girls directly said that I looked too pumped up or too into myself. It was unexpected and, to be honest, a little disappointing. Another problem also arose. Many girls began to see only my appearance in me. They thought I was obsessed with sports and not interested in anything else, which is far from the truth. I am interested in many things, from music to literature. But when they saw my muscles, for some reason it blocked out everything else. This was a lesson for me. I realized that appearance is important, but much more important is how you communicate and what is in your head. On the other hand, I also encountered a situation where girls began to show interest, but this interest was superficial. They wanted the ideal guy in terms of appearance, but were not interested in my personality. It was a strange feeling when you realize that your efforts in the gym have attracted attention, but that attention is based on something temporary and superficial. Ultimately, I realized that a pumped-up body is cool, but in itself, it does not automatically make you successful with girls. Yes, you may get more attention, you may get a few compliments, but it takes a lot more to build something real. For me, fitness has become a part of life, but I realize that personal qualities, confidence, the ability to carry out an interesting conversation and be an interesting person are much more important in the long term. So if someone thinks that muscles alone will change your life, this is an illusion. They may be part of success, but only part. Answer 4. When I started training seriously in the gym and saw the first results, I was in seventh heaven. My body was changing, my muscles were growing, and I began to feel more confident. The thought was spinning in my head. Well, now everything will change. Girls will start paying attention. It will be easier to meet people and communicate. But, as it turned out, the reality turned out to be a little different. At first, there were small but pleasant changes. In the gym, girls actually started coming up to me, asking for advice on exercises, and complimenting me on my form. It definitely fed my ego. People outside the hall also began to notice. For example, in the company of friends, I sometimes caught the glances of girls whom I previously seemed not to be interested in. However, as I became more muscular, I began to notice some negative aspects. Firstly, not all the girls were delighted with my new appearance. Some even said that I looked too tough or scary, especially when I started wearing clothes that showed off my muscles. This was unexpected, since I never thought that it was possible to pump up to such an extent that it would be intimidating. Secondly, I was faced with the fact that muscles attracted a certain type of girl, which I was not particularly interested in. These girls cared more about looks than what kind of person I was. There was a lot of superficial communication that did not lead to anything serious. They might talk about me as the hot guy, but that's not what I was looking for in a relationship. Another interesting point is that I began to feel that a pumped-up body sometimes causes envy or even irritation among guys, which also affected communication in the company. They might start to see me as a rival, even if I didn't want it myself. This creates additional tension in communication when you constantly have to prove that you are not just a jock. At some point, I even began to wonder if it was worth it. A lot of time, effort, and discipline went into staying in shape, but it did not bring the social dividends that I expected. Of course, I'm proud of my body and what I've achieved, but I've also learned that looks aren't everything. Ultimately, I had to reset my expectations and learn to see things differently. Muscles can help attract attention, but if you want something more, sincere relationships, mutual understanding, appearance does not always play a key role. I learned to appreciate personal qualities, both mine and other people, and a pumped-up body became a pleasant bonus for me, but not the goal of life. Answer 5. When I first started working out seriously in the gym, I was about 19 years old. At school, I was always a guy of average build, not skinny, but not muscular either. I never felt like I attracted much attention from girls, and I hoped that changing my body would fix that. It was about a year after I started training that the changes became obvious. I not only gained muscle mass, but also became more fit and resilient. My friends and acquaintances began to notice this and often asked how I was able to change my body so quickly. In the beginning, it was inspiring, and I felt great. However, what I expected to see in my personal life was not so clear-cut. The girls really began to show interest in me, but this was more due to their desire to learn the secrets of fitness and proper nutrition than to a real desire to get to know each other better. Many saw me simply as a coach or a person who could help them achieve similar results. I became a fitness guide of sorts for many of them, but it didn't turn into any kind of romantic relationship. One of the unexpected aspects was that some of the girls I used to hang out with started avoiding me. I later realized that this was due to the fact that I had become more confident and may have seemed arrogant or unapproachable to them. In their eyes, I may have become too me-focused. This was unpleasant to realize because I did not change my attitude towards them, I just changed in appearance. There was another case. I started dating a girl who was initially impressed with my physique, but it quickly became clear that her interest was superficial. She didn't try to get to know me better. She was more interested in how I looked and what others would think of us. This relationship quickly ended, and I realized that physical attractiveness cannot be the basis for a serious relationship. Amid all these changes, I began to realize that a pumped-up body is not what makes you more attractive on a long-term basis. Yes, it can help at first, it can arouse interest, but then it all depends on your personality, on who you really are. Now I perceive my body as the result of hard work and discipline, but I understand that this is not the main thing in life. It is important how you communicate with people, what values and interests you have, and only this helps to build real, deep relationships. Answer 6. I started lifting not because I wanted more attention from girls, but because I always wanted to improve my health and well-being. I was the guy who sat at the computer and moved little, and at some point I realized that this was not leading to anything good, so I decided it was time to change my lifestyle. At first I didn't notice any special changes. I just went to the gym, did exercises, and gradually built up strength and endurance. But after a few months, I began to notice that my body was starting to change. My muscles became more prominent, and overall I felt much better. This change gradually began to affect the way I perceived myself. My confidence grew, and that probably showed in my behavior. But here's what was interesting. Girls began to pay more attention to me, not when I began to swing, but when I became more confident in myself. I think it has something to do with it. When you feel better physically, it transfers to everything else. One day I was at a party, and a girl approached me with whom I had previously studied in the same class, but had never really communicated. She noted that I had changed, become more grown up, or something like that. It was unexpected but pleasant. However, I must say that there have been no dramatic changes in the number of girls in my life. Yes, confidence made it easier to meet people and communicate, but I also realized that appearance is only one side of the coin. In fact, it all comes down to how you can carry on a conversation, how you communicate with people, what interests and goals you have. There was even a time when I started dating a girl who was initially impressed by my physique, but it quickly became clear that it was superficial, and our relationship did not develop. We parted on a friendly note, but it made me understand that building something serious only on the basis of appearance is a dead end. Now I continue to train because it has become part of my lifestyle. I no longer chase an ideal figure or the recognition of others. It's important to me to feel good, be healthy, and maintain balance. And if it attracts girls' attention, great, but that's not the main goal. I realize that the most important thing is to be yourself and strive for what truly makes you happy. Answer 7. My passion for sports began not out of a desire to impress someone, but rather out of an inner necessity. I was always weak, often sick, and at some point I realized that it was time to change my lifestyle. I started with light training, then got carried away with heavy exercise, and it became something like therapy for me. As the muscles began to grow, I noticed changes in my environment. Some people, especially those who knew me before, suddenly began to treat me differently. Girls who previously simply ignored began to pay attention. For the first time in my life, I felt that I could influence how others perceived me. But it wasn't quite what I imagined. At first, I really enjoyed the attention. Girls started coming up, asking about my training and complimenting me. It was new and nice. But then I realized that there is often nothing serious behind this attention. It's like a facade. People see only the outer shell and draw their own conclusions without trying to really get to know you. One of the strangest moments happened when I started dating a girl who was fascinated by my appearance. Everything was fine until I noticed that the most important thing for her was that I fit her idea of the ideal guy. She wanted me to always look a certain way, to be an example for her friends and acquaintances. I ended up feeling uncomfortable, as if I was more of an accessory to her than a partner. After that relationship ended, I realized that appearance should not define who you really are. Muscles and figure are important, but they do not replace real qualities such as kindness, listening skills, and support. I stopped focusing on how I looked and started paying more attention to the kind of person I was becoming. Now I continue to train, but I do it for myself. I realize that appearance can help in the first stage of dating, but to build something real, you need much more. And now, when I date girls, I try to show that behind the appearance there is a real person with interests, goals, and feelings. Answer 8. When I first started thinking about getting serious about sports, it was more about proving to myself that I could achieve something meaningful. I was never particularly athletic and was often teased at school for being thin. I always wanted to be stronger, and at some point I decided it was time to change that. I immersed myself in training, studied everything about nutrition, proper exercise technique, and gradually began to see results. My body was changing. I was becoming more and more muscular, and it did not go unnoticed. The girls who had previously passed by suddenly began to show interest. For the first time in my life, I felt at the top. It seemed that everything had become the way I had dreamed. But the more time I spent in the gym and the more my muscles grew, the more I began to notice that the attention from girls had changed. This was not the attention I dreamed of. Yes, the compliments and interested glances were pleasant, but over time I began to understand that many only saw me for my appearance. They were fascinated by my physical form, but did not try to get to know me as a person. There were times when I felt like I was just a trophy, someone to show off to my friends, but nothing more. It was disappointing. One day I even overheard a conversation between two girls discussing me in the gym. They talked about what I looked like, but nothing about who I was as a person. At that moment I realized that muscles are not everything. There were other times when I tried to build relationships, but girls just couldn't see beyond those muscles for who I really was. One day I started dating a girl who was initially impressed with my results in the gym, but it soon became obvious that her interest rested only on that. We ended up breaking up because we had nothing in common except her admiration for my biceps. Now I look at all this differently. I realize that physical fitness is cool, but it shouldn't define you as a person. Now I am more focused on developing in all aspects of life, physically, intellectually, and emotionally. I want people to know me as a person, not just a guy with muscles. And if someone still sees me only on the outside, I realize that it's their problem, not mine. Muscles may get attention, but real relationships are built on a much deeper level. Answer 9. I started playing sports seriously about 3 years ago. Before that, I was an ordinary guy, without much physical training, and didn't even think about how my body could affect my life. But at some point I realized that I wanted to change my appearance, become stronger and more confident. This was perhaps caused by a feeling of dissatisfaction with myself, or perhaps by the fact that I wanted to prove to others that I could achieve something. The first months were difficult. My muscles were sore and the results weren't coming as quickly as I expected, but I didn't give up. I started reading about nutrition, studying workout programs, and gradually began to notice that my body was starting to change. After a year of hard training, I could barely recognize myself in the mirror. My shoulders became broader, my abs appeared, and I felt like I had achieved something significant. And that's when I first noticed that those around me began to perceive me differently. Girls who had previously simply passed by began to stare at me. Some even came up and started conversations. This was new to me, and I admit, it pleased my vanity. I became more confident in communication, began to flirt more, and even received more attention on social networks which previously seemed unattainable to me. However, after a while I began to notice that everything was not as rosy as I first thought. Yes, the girls' attention increased, but I realized that this attention was more superficial. The muscles attracted interest, but few of those who began to communicate with me were really interested in me as a person. They saw me as just a pumped-up guy who they could show off to their friends, but nothing more. I remember once at a party I met a girl who immediately showed interest in me. We started dating, and at first everything went well. But after a couple of months, I noticed that our conversations rarely went beyond discussing sports, training, and how I looked. She constantly wanted me to take more photos and post them on social media, as if my worth was determined only by my appearance. At some point, I realized that she only sees in me the image that I myself created. A strong and pumped-up guy, but does not see who I really am. It was unpleasant. I began to wonder if I had become a hostage to my own body. To some extent, I myself contributed to this, because initially I wanted to impress others with my physical form. But now I realize that more than just muscles is important to me. I want people to see the real me, with my hobbies, interests, weaknesses, and aspirations. There was another incident that helped me reconsider my attitude towards appearance. I met a girl who seemed really interested in me. We started talking, and I immediately felt that we had a lot in common. But as soon as she found out that I was actively involved in sports and saw me several times in sportswear, her interest quickly cooled. She openly said that she doesn't like guys who are too muscular and that she's looking for someone more regular. It was a blow to my ego, but also a lesson. I learned that you can't please everyone, and that appearance can both attract and repel. Now I continue to play sports, but with a different approach. For me, it's not so much a way to attract attention, but a way to stay healthy and confident. I no longer prioritize appearance in my relationships. If someone only cares about my body, that's their right, but I no longer want to be judged only on my appearance. I have learned to value my personal qualities and strive for others to see me as more than just muscles. Muscles may be impressive, but they don't define who I really am. For a real relationship, something more is important: mutual understanding, respect, support, and this is what I value most now. Answer 10. When I first started training, my goal was to change myself not only physically, but also psychologically. I was that guy who was always self-conscious about my appearance, especially as a teenager. My thin physique and lack of self-confidence meant that I rarely approached girls or even just talked to them. It seemed that changing my appearance would be the solution to all my problems. The first months in the gym were difficult. I didn't know what I was doing, and I was constantly comparing myself to more experienced athletes. But I persisted, and after a year or two, I noticed significant changes. My muscles began to grow, my body became ripped, and I began to receive compliments not only from friends, but also from strangers. It was a new experience for me, and at some point I felt that I was finally achieving what I always wanted: attention and recognition. But as it turns out, with that attention came some unexpected consequences. Girls really started to show interest in me, which was nice at first. I felt more confident, started going on dates more often, and everything seemed to be going according to plan. But then I began to notice that many girls only saw me as a cool jock. This attention had more to do with my appearance than who I was as a person. I remember one case when I started dating a girl who at first seemed ideal. She loved sports. We often discussed training and even sometimes worked out together. But the more we talked, the more I realized that her interest in me was superficial. She was fascinated by the way I looked, but she was not at all interested in what I thought, what my dreams or goals were in life. Our conversations rarely went beyond discussing training or my results in the gym. One day when I tried to talk to her about more serious topics, about the future, about our interests outside of fitness, she simply diverted the conversation back to sports. At that moment, I realized that for her I was more of a project than a partner. It was disappointing. We broke up, and after that I began to rethink my attitude towards what is truly important in a relationship. Another incident happened when I met a girl who immediately openly said that she was attracted to muscular guys. She was fun, outgoing, and we went on some great dates. But then I began to notice that it was important for her to show me to her friends as some kind of achievement. It was a strange feeling, as if I had become a way for her to prove something to others, and not a real partner. With each new experience, I realized more and more that physical fitness is not all that is needed to build real and deep relationships. Appearance may attract attention, but it cannot hold interest. I realized that it is important to be an interesting person, to have goals, values, and to be able to maintain genuine relationships. Now, when I look at my life, I see that training has given me a lot of positive things: confidence, health, strength. But they also taught me an important lesson. Being pumped up does not mean being successful in your personal life. I don't put appearance first anymore. I value deep conversations, mutual understanding, and genuine relationships. If someone is only interested in me because of the way I look, that's not the person I want to build a future with. And yes, I still work out, but now it's more than just a way for me to look better. It has become a part of my life, but it does not completely define me. I realize that being yourself, staying true to your values, and pursuing real, genuine relationships is what really matters. Answer 11. I've always been a guy with a normal build. Not skinny, but not particularly toned either. It never occurred to me that I needed to specifically work on my body until I faced a self-esteem crisis after graduating from university. Difficulties began to arise in my life, problems with work, personal failures, and I decided that changes in the physical plane would help me gain confidence and control over my life. So I started going to the gym. At first it was not easy, but gradually I got used to it. After a few months, I could no longer imagine my life without training. My muscles began to grow, and not only friends and acquaintances, but also girls noticed this. It was a new experience for me to receive compliments from girls I didn't even know. It seemed that now that I had muscles, life would finally get better. The first changes in my relationships with girls were really noticeable. I became more confident, started going out on dates more often, and even started several short relationships. But I soon realized that most of these novels were superficial. The girls I dated often saw me as just looks. They were impressed by my physicality, but not interested in who I really was. One of the most memorable experiences was when I started dating a girl who was an obvious fitness freak. We met at the gym, and our first conversations were about training and nutrition. I was glad that I found someone who shared my interests. But the more we talked, the more I began to notice that her interest in me was focused solely on my appearance. She constantly asked about my training, suggested new exercises, but was never interested in my thoughts or feelings. After some time, I began to feel that our relationship was not progressing. We were together, but I felt that she saw in me only an ideal body and not a person with emotions and inner world. This was a real disappointment for me. I realized that if a girl is only interested in your muscles, she is unlikely to be able to truly see you. Another incident happened at work. I noticed that after I became pumped up, some colleagues, especially women, began to treat me differently. They smiled more often, showed interest, and at some point I even thought that this was the real life I had dreamed of. But over time I realized that it was more about perception than actual changes in the relationship. Many of them simply saw me as a person who works hard on himself physically, but did not try to get to know me better. This experience made me think about what is truly important in life. I realized that physical fitness can change perceptions, but it cannot replace real personal qualities such as kindness, listening, support. I stopped focusing on appearance and began to work more on myself from the inside. Now I try to build relationships based on mutual understanding, common interests, and depth of communication. Now I continue to train, but this is no longer just an attempt to improve my body. It became a way for me to maintain health and internal balance. I realize that muscles are good, but they do not determine my worth as a person. And if someone sees in me only appearance, this is their choice. But I strive for something more, for a real, sincere relationship, where not only the body is valued, but also the soul. Answer 12. My story with fitness began quite unexpectedly. I was never particularly interested in sports. I was quite happy with my body, although it was not ideal. But one day a friend invited me to the gym just to try it out, and I decided that it wouldn't hurt to get in shape a little. To be honest, at the beginning, I didn't even think that this would lead to any serious changes in my life. At first, training was just a way for me to escape from the routine. But the more I did it, the more I began to like it. I began to notice changes. My body became more toned, my muscles grew, and I began to feel more confident. A year later, I already looked completely different, and it did not go unnoticed. I especially noticed how the girls' attitude towards me changed. At university, I was always in the shadows, an average guy who didn't stand out in appearance or anything else. But after I gained muscle mass, I suddenly started getting more attention. Girls who had not noticed me before began to start conversations, and some even began to openly flirt. It was a new experience, and I enjoyed the attention. However, quite quickly I realized that behind this attention, there was something superficial. Yes, girls were interested in me, but most often it was solely due to my appearance. I remember an incident when, at one party, a girl with whom I was studying on the same course approached me. She started the conversation with a compliment about my arms, and our entire conversation revolved around how I looked and how much time I spent in the gym. She was not interested in who I was, what I was interested in, what I thought about. At that moment, I realized that this is not what I really want. Another incident happened when I started dating a girl who was a real fitness freak. She was impressed with how I looked, and we often spent time in the gym together. But over time, I noticed that she only sees me as a coach and training partner. Our conversations always boiled down to discussing new programs, exercises, and nutrition. She was not interested in my thoughts, dreams, goals outside the gym. This was a real disappointment for me, and we ended up breaking up. I began to realize that appearances can open doors, but they will not keep them open. Yes, muscles can attract attention, but to build something real, you need more. You need to have something that will attract people as they get to know you. I began to think more about what was important to me in a relationship, and realized that I wanted to be with those who value me for more than just my appearance. Now I continue to train because it has become a part of my life, but I no longer strive for the ideal that I saw before. I train for myself, for my health, in order to feel good. And if someone sees me only as muscles, that's their choice. But I now know that I want to be with people who value me for my inner qualities. This experience taught me that it is important to be real in life. Appearance can attract, but only sincerity and mutual understanding can build something worthwhile. And if I have to choose, I will always choose those who see me for real, and not just a beautiful facade.